Good morning. This is Armansi, your teacher for subject English. So today we are going to start the first lesson for class 12th English. That is the last lesson. Okay. So the writer of the last lesson is Alphonse Daudet, to whom you are watching on the screen. He is Alphonse Daudet. So before delving into the chapter and the analysis of the chapter, let me tell something about Alphonse Daudet. You can see in the screen about his biography. He took birth in 13 May in the year of 1840 in France and then died in the year of 1897, December 16. And when he died, his age was 56. He died in France, Paris. And as per his occupation is, he was a novelist, short story writer, playwright and also a poet. And he belonged to the literary movement of naturalism. Okay, so it was about Alphonse Daudet. Now let me tell you something about the chapter. This chapter directly or indirectly deals with the Franco-Prussian War. So unless and until you understand what is Franco-Prussian War, who were the parties, who took part in the war, until knowing all these things, you cannot get the flavor of that lesson. Okay, so let's get into the Franco-Prussian War. I'll just give a brief introduction to Franco-Prussian War. So you can see in the screen the Franco-Prussian War. It is also known as Franco-German War. So by this name you are understanding, I think you are able to understand that it was fought in between France and Germany. Okay, and it was often referred to in France as the War of 1870. It was a conflict between the Second French Empire and the German states. So it's very clear that it was fought between French Empire and German states of the North German Confederation led by the Kingdom of Prussia. So especially the North German Confederation took part in the War of 1870, which was led by the Kingdom of Prussia. Prussia was leading the North German states. Okay, so this war lasted from 19 July 1870 to 28 January 1871. 1 year of war it was. Okay, and the conflict was caused by French fears of a shift in the European balance of power if the Prussians succeeded in achieving German unification. So actually why this happened, why this war took place? Because of the French fears. France was in great fear for the shift of its European balance of power to the hands of German or Prussia, to the hands of Prussia, if it is getting a unification with the German nation. So it was the main reason for which the war took place. And one more thing, Otto von Bismarck, he was the Lord Chancellor of Prussia. He deliberately, provoked France for declaring a war. Okay, so Otto von Bismarck deliberately provoked the French into declaring a war on Prussia. Okay, why? In order to draw the 4 independent southern German states into an alliance with the North German Confederation, which was again dominated by Prussia. So this was all about the brief introduction about the war. Let's get into the chapter now. So the last lesson about the author, as we discussed just now, Alphonse Daudet, who took birth in 1840 and died in 1897. He was a French novelist and short story writer. The last lesson is set in the days of the Franco-Prussian War, which started in 1870 and lasted till 1871, in which France was defeated by Prussia. So who were participated in the war? One is France and another one is Prussia. And Prussia was led by Bismarck. And in this war, France was defeated by Prussia. Prussia then consisted of what now are the nations of Germany, Poland and parts of Austria. And in this story, the French districts of Alsace and Lorraine have passed into Prussian hands. So what happened in this lesson in the Franco-Prussian War, when France was defeated in the hands of Prussia, then some of the districts of France was handed over to the hands of Prussia. So you can imagine that how the people of those districts will be no more the citizens of, no more the no more the people of that particular country. They'll be considered like the people of another country from them. They are no more the people of France from that moment when it was handed over to Prussia. They belong to Prussia now. They will be considered as the people of Prussia. So how do you feel if we tell that you are not belonging to India now? You will be like some other countrymen from this point of time. So this will be a disheartening thing for anybody who is truly patriotic. Okay, so this lesson, the last lesson, is going to deal with the same theme, that what will be the effect of this situation, this painful situation of those districts on life at school particularly. Without delaying, let's get started. Let's deal with the chapter. Here, let me tell you one thing, that this chapter was narrated by, this story is narrated by a small boy whose name was Franz. Okay, Franz was a school going boy. He is lazy, but at the same time he was sensitive and he liked to play. Okay, and he disliked studying. He was never a curious boy, like who was interested to study more. He always liked to play and he disliked studying. He disliked French language and also he hated his teacher M. Hamel a lot. So let's start. I started for school very late that morning and was in great dread of a scolding, especially because M. Hamel had said that he would question us on participles and I didn't know the first word about them. On a fine morning, what happened? The boy Franz was scared as he was late for school that day. And also he was scared for his teacher M. Hamel, who had given him a task of memorizing the participles, the topic of participles. And he did not know anything at all about participles. So he was very scared of the teacher and also being scolded by the teacher. For a moment I thought of running away and spending the day out of doors. It was so warm, so bright, the birds were chirping at the edge of the woods, and in the open field back of the sawmill, the Prussian soldiers were drilling. The two words here, the two difficult words here is sawmill. Sawmill is a kind of factory for cutting woods. Okay, wood cutting factory we can say. And drilling means here exercising. So then he was very much afraid of being scolded by his teacher. That's why he had an option in his mind. He wanted to go out. He didn't want to to sit in the classroom to be scolded by teacher. So he wanted to miss the school and enjoy the day out in the warm and bright weather. So he went on describing the scene. He told that at the time the birds were chirping and the trees, the noise of the Prussian soldiers. The Prussian soldiers were drilling at that time. They were exercising and behind the sawmill. So all these sounds were very attractive for him to go out of the classroom. He didn't want to sit in the classroom. It was all much more tempting than the rule for participles, but I had the strength to resist and hurried off to school. Tempting means attracting. All these sounds coming from outside the classroom, it was very tempting, it was very attracting. But anyhow, he resisted his temptation. He wanted to stay away, the thinking of going out and enjoying the beauty of nature. He wanted to be in the classroom because anyhow he was a school going boy. He was a student. He has to be there in the classroom. So the scene outside was more attractive. It means, let's see what happens. When I passed the town hall, there was a crowd in front of the bulletin board For the last 2 years, all our bad news had come from there. The lost battles, the draft, the orders of the commanding officer, and I thought to myself without stopping, what can be the matter now? See here, bulletin board means a notice board. Okay, it's a kind of notice board for putting up the latest news and which can communicate the people in a good way. So, Franz walked past the town hall. He noticed at a particular spot that there was a huge crowd there, and that was in front of the notice board, the bulletin board. The war with Prussia had begun 2.5 years ago. Okay, 2.5 years ago the war with Prussia had begun, and since then all the bad news, like as we know that France was like losing the war, so all the bad news about the losing the war and occupation of Alsace and Lorraine by the enemy, how the Alsace and Lorraine districts are being occupied by the enemy country Prussia, and it has been communicated to the people through that particular bulletin board. Okay, so Franz kept on walking towards the school and thought in his mind that what's the new news? What could be the news on that particular day? What's the bad news to be heard at that moment? So he went on. Let's see what happens now. Then, as I hurried by, as fast as I could go, the blacksmith, watcher, who was there with his apprentice, reading the bulletin, called after me, "Don't go so fast, bub. You'll get to your school in plenty of time." I thought he was making fun of me and reached M. Hamel's little garden, all out of breath. So, you see, as he walked hurriedly towards the school, there was a blacksmith who was also reading the news and had come along with his trainee, called out the little Franz. He called out Franz from behind and said that he need not go in such a hurry, as there was plenty of time for him to reach school. There was, there was no reason for him to go in such a hurried manner to school. There was time, he very coolly told the little boy. Franz thought that the blacksmith was making fun of him as he was already late for school. So Franz thought that maybe it was an irony that the blacksmith is throwing upon him. When Franz reached the garden out the school, he was out of breath as he walked very fast. Okay, so very hurriedly he went to the school, and then let's see what happens with him. Usually when school began, there was a great bustle which could be heard out in the street, the opening and closing of desks, lessons repeated in unison, very loud, with our hands over our ears to understand better, and the teacher's great ruler rapping on the table. Okay, a great bustle means a lot of noise created by many people. Okay, and in unison means at the same time, at the same moment. Rapping means striking, tapping. Okay, rapping means tapping and striking. So then Franz described the usual scene at the school in the mornings. There will be a lot of noise created by the moving desks, children repeating their lessons, and teachers striking the tables with the rulers. All these sounds could be heard every day in the morning when the class time begins. But now it was all so still. I had counted on the commotion to get to my desk without being seen. But of course, that day everything had to be as quiet as Sunday morning. Counted on means depended upon. Commotion means that great noise and confusion which was, being produced in the classroom. Commotion means the great noise. That day was unusual, as there was no such sound coming out of the school, coming out from the class. And it seemed that the school was closed as it used to be on Sunday morning. When he entered into the classroom, he felt that it was a Sunday morning. It was very quiet. Nobody was making noise. He was actually surprised to know that what happened that particular day. It was a kind of Sunday morning. Okay. Franz had planned that he would take cover under the commotion and reach the class without being noticed. See, he was a boy and he was fearful about being scolded. So that's why he wanted that under the commotion he will be reaching the classroom without being noticed by anybody. Okay, anybody should not see him, or anybody should not notice him that he was late at that day. Okay, so through the window I saw my classmates already in their places, and M. Hamel walking up and down with his terrible iron ruler under his arm. As we see that Franz peeped inside his class and saw his classmates seated, and M. Hamel was walking, to and fro in the class with his ruler. He put his ruler under his arm, and then Franz was just fearful of being beaten by his teacher. I had to open the door and go in before everybody. You can imagine how I blushed and how frightened I was. Blushed means, the change of color due to shame, the change in color of your face due to shame. So Franz was ashamed of being late, and he feared about getting scolded, as he had to enter the classroom in front of everyone. But nothing happened. M. Hamel saw me and said very kindly, "Go to your place quickly, little Franz. We were beginning without you." Franz found it very strange that M. Hamel didn't say anything, didn't scold him. On the contrary, very politely, he asked him that, "Dear kid, you go and sit. The class was about to begin without you." I jumped over the bench and sat down at my desk. Not till then, when I had got a little over my fright, did I see that our teacher had on his beautiful green coat, his frilled shirt, and the little black silk cap, all embroidered, that he never wore except on inspection and prize days. So that particular day, the teacher was looking somehow very unique. He was in a unique dressing. When Franz hurried to his seat, he overcame the scare and became comfortable. He sat there comfortably, and he noticed that the teacher had worn his best embroidered shirt at that day. The teacher normally wears such kind of unique dresses on occasions, like if it is an inspection day or any prize distribution days. Franz wondered if the day was a normal day or something. There was a reason behind why M. Hamel was in his special dress. Okay. Besides, the whole school seemed so strange and solemn. But the thing that surprised me most was to see on the back benches that were always empty the village people sitting quietly like ourselves. Old Hauser with his three-cornered hat, the former mayor, the former postmaster, and several others besides. Solemn means serious. Okay. So Franz felt that the atmosphere in the school was very unusual, and everybody seemed to be very serious that day. The last benches of that classroom, which was every day it was empty, but on that particular day it was occupied by some people of the village. Okay. Old Hauser, who was wearing his three-cornered hat, and the retired mayor, postmaster, everybody, they had occupied the seats, like the last benches of that classroom. Everybody looked sad, and Hauser had brought an old primer, thumbed at the edges, and he held it open on his knees with his great spectacles lying across the pages. Primer means the basic reader for any language. Okay, it's a kind of basic reader for any language. So thumbed means torn, tear, past participle of tear is torn or damaged, we can say, thumped. Okay. So all of the people who occupied the back benches, they were looking very sad, they looked very sad, and Hauser had brought his reader, his basic reader, the primer, which was old and torn, and he had opened it, and he had kept it on his knees, and he had placed his spectacles on his primer. While I was wondering about it all, M. Hamel mounted his chair, and in the same grave and gentle tone which he had used to me, said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. The order has come from Berlin to teach only German in the schools of Alsace and Lorraine. The new master comes tomorrow. This is your last French lesson. I want you to be very attentive." See, here grave means serious. Okay, so Franz was confused, and he could not figure out what happened to the people that day. Why old Hauser was there with his primer? Why he was in a serious mood? Why everybody looked so serious? Just then M. Hamel revealed the reason for the seriousness over the classroom. Why? Because it was their last lesson in French. As we know that the districts of Alsace and Lorraine was handed over to Prussia. So Prussians didn't want that French language should be used. French language would no longer be taught in the schools. It was a command from the Prussian government. So Alsace and Lorraine, they will not be using French language anymore. They'll be using German language from that day onwards. German language will be taught in the classroom instead. The German teacher will be arriving the next day, M. Hamel told, that as this was the last lesson in French by M. Hamel. See, he was a language teacher. M. Hamel was a language teacher. So if French was no longer of any use for the French people, that means what is the need of M. Hamel? M. Hamel was, above all, he was the language teacher. If there is no French, that means no need of language teacher, no need of French teacher. So M. Hamel wanted that all should pay attention because it was his last lesson in that classroom, in that school. What a thunderclap these words were to me. Oh, the wretches! That was what they had put up at the town hall. Thunderclap means it was unexpected. You see, it was startling for everybody. Everybody was they were surprised to know that French language will not be any use for them. Then Franz was shocked. Okay, so to know that he could not learn French any longer. See, till then he was a very lazy boy. He did not love the French language. He did not like even. But the latest news was there will be no use of French language, and it was a kind of surprising thing for even the little boy. He was even disheartened by the fact that no French will be used from that day. So, my last French lesson, why I hardly knew how to write. I should never learn anymore. I must stop there. Then, oh, how sorry I was for not learning my lessons, for seeking birds' eggs, or going sliding on the Saar. Saar, it's a river which passes through France. So Franz regretted for not being serious towards his studies. He was a very lazy boy, lazy child. He never wanted to study. So he was regretting at that moment when he knew that language will not be taught, French language will not be taught. He thought of his, behavior towards studying, how he was used to waste his time in hunting birds' eggs and playing in the Saar River. All day and all the evening he wanted to be there. He never wanted to sit in the classroom. Even on that day also he wanted that how he can escape from the classroom and how he can escape from the class teachers. Okay. So he was regretting, in fact. My books that had seemed such a nuisance a while ago, so heavy to carry, my grammar and my history of the saints, were old friends now that I could not give up. Nuisance means a great problem, okay, it's a burden. So, till now, Franz was considering his books to be an unwanted burden, the burden which he wanted to take up from his, from his body or from his mind. But suddenly he started considering them to be his best friends. And M. Hamel too, the idea that he was going away, that I should never see him again, made me forget all about his ruler and how cranky he was. Cranky means short-tempered, okay, ill-tempered, who gets angry very easily. So here, the news that their teacher M. Hamel is going to leave them, it also made him very unhappy, made the little, Franz very unhappy. Franz didn't want that his teacher M. Hamel should go away. He no longer thought that his teacher to be very short-tempered or strict. So he wanted his teacher to be there for them, with them. Okay. Poor man. It was in honor of this last lesson that he had put on his fine Sunday clothes. And now I understood why the old men of the village were sitting there in the back of the room. Now Franz could understand that M. Hamel was wearing his best dress, his special dress, in honor of this last lesson. M. Hamel knew that it was his last lesson, that's why he wore his special dress. Usually he wears such dresses on special occasions. He also realized it, the boy also realized that the village men, they also, they came there to pay their respect, to show their respect and to show their gratitude and to thank M. Hamel for, his service of 40 years in that school. It was because they were sorry too, that they had not gone to school more. It was their way of thanking our master for his 40 years of faithful service and of showing their respect for the country that was theirs no more. The village man had come to the class as, they were kind of repenting that they had not studied well in their childhood. They are not so educated. They had to thank their teacher for the long 40 years of wonderful service of French language. Also they wanted to pay their respect, to pay their gratitude to their country, and they were very sad that as their mother tongue French, it will not be used any longer to be taught to them. So that's it for this video. I'll be making another video because it is going so long. So in the next part, we'll be discussing the next part of this chapter. So stay tuned.